Right, I want to do a response video to a YouTube channel called The Wealth of Nations. Um, and this is to do with healthcare and how it compares in the US compared to the UK. Now, I don't usually do response videos. I mean, this is, I don't really have the time or the wherewithal to produce something that's of kind of high enough quality to be considered a decent video. But I thought I'd give this one a shot. So even though it's just going to be quite amateurish, basically I'm sat here with my iPhone. I'm just going to record this video and then stop it at various places and give my commentary on it. So there won't be any editing. It will be just in its rough and ready form. Now, obviously, the Wealth of Nations, anybody who has any understanding of the Enlightenment or economics, is one of the most seminal books produced by any figure in the Enlightenment, and that's the Scottish philosopher, economist, whatever you want to call him, Adam Smith. One of the, along with people like Charles Darwin and Isaac Newton, these are all huge figures of the Enlightenment. So big that we have him on the back of our £20 notes. There he is, just merging into the Queen's head there. Now, I think the problem with when people read Adam Smith and read his book, The Wealth of Nations, I think they read it probably a little bit too much in a prescriptive way rather than what I tend to think it is, which is more of a descriptive book on economics and the fast evolving industry of the day, how the world at that particular time was modernizing very, very quickly. And I think with a lot of books that are not particularly scientific but are more deal with social issues rather than scientific issues, I think to hang on to them almost like a Bible, I think is very, very problematic. I think people do that a lot with Karl Marx, and they do it with Adam Smith, and they do it with lots of other people who've written very seminal books or had very advanced ideas at a particular time that really we've moved on from and we've kind of outgrown. But that's by the by. That's me waffling on a little bit. So I want to get this video started, and I'm going to, as I say, I'm going to pause it in a few places, and we'll see where it goes. So let's just get that started.
Another discussion, another video on healthcare in the United States. It's been great. There's been a lot of response from my other video, responding to the Brits talking about the NHS and hearing different prices in the United States. So let's go over to the other side of the ocean and find out what Americans think of socialized medicine. Let's get into it. This will be a reaction video. We will see what we can come up with from the Americans and see what they think of systems like the NHS.
What do you think about socialized healthcare?
I do not like the idea of that.
Okay, so the presenters have picked out, perhaps selectively, I don't know, two lovely, what I imagine to be Republican women who are strolling the streets of New York City. and they are asked certain questions. And the first woman makes a good point, and this is usually where the conversation ends for Republicans, and where the discussion falls short, in my view, with Republicans or people who are more right-wing leaning. There has to be more than this. There has to be a better discussion, a better argument against socialized medicine, but oftentimes that's as far as it goes. Let's continue.
I don't want the government picking what I can and cannot do.
Well, my husband's from Europe.
Doesn't want the government to pick what you can and cannot do. And that is basically what happens if you move to a socialized system. A socialized system controls prices, it controls services, it sets the price for what it's going to cost, and basically dictates how the industry will run. What you will get, how you will be provided for, etc. And the first argument the lady said about the government not being involved in medicine, for example. It's a very good argument, but perhaps it's not always articulated why. Why is it important that the government stays out? Because it must implement too much control over pricing, over the market, that it stifles the system. Let's continue.
Yeah. Oh, where to start on this one? For a start, the government in the UK doesn't dictate what you do with your health or what service is provided for you. You have an option of accessing the National Health Service, but we do have private insurance as well in this country, so people are free to take whatever insurance out they want, and therefore if they do that, like you do in America, in fact you may have, I don't know the exact situation in America, because I've heard reports that even though you pay through the nose for your health service there, you're not exactly free to go where you want. There is some inconsistency within the system, because it isn't a system, it's a mishmash of different insurance companies, different hospitals. Certain hospitals, from what I understand, only deal with certain insurance companies, so therefore if you're with an insurance company and you go to one particular hospital, they may not actually deal with that insurance company, etc., etc. So as for the situation in the UK, and this is a problem with, as I was mentioning a little bit earlier with reading Adam Smith, not every institution or every situation is or should be open to the market. Why is that something that Americans, or certainly libertarian Americans, I'm assuming this guy, the Wealth of Nations, is a libertarian American. Why is that such a seems to be such an absolutist position that everything has to be down to the market? We have markets over here in the UK. So, for example, many years ago, you used to get your gas and electricity supply from one company. The price was set. It did used to be state-run when I was a lot younger, but whether it's state-run or not, the price was set, and therefore you kind of knew what you were paying for. You were paying for the gas or the electricity, and you would like to think that it was costed to the point whereby you're actually paying what it costs, and there is no middleman there taking out a profit from it, because there is no need for a profit in a system that is supposed to be for the national good. Now, there's an argument there whether that's actually the case regarding gas and electricity. I argue very much that it's the case regarding health, because health is not something that you can totally and utterly choose. Yes, you have some control over your health, but you don't know if you're going to be involved in an accident that's completely out of your control. It's not something that, like, going to a gas supplier or an electricity supplier and saying, I'm looking on the internet, or I'm going to these different suppliers, and I can check the costs of all those suppliers and choose the one that benefits me most, whether that's the cheapest one or the one that gives me the widest possible service, or whatever it is that I want to choose. Now, the problem that we have in this country, we do have several energy companies all competing for our pounds. But the problem is there is very, very little price difference, because we understand that actually the market doesn't work, because there is still a basic price for energy, for gas, for whatever it is, for oil, for gas. There is a very basic level, and then each company will put on top whatever amount of profit that they wish to put on top of that. And quite often, because most companies are competing on the stock market as well, they obviously deal in stocks and shares. It's important that people dealing in those stocks and shares see that that company's profits are rising every year. Now, this is the same for every company, every privatized company. They're always looking to increase their profits. So you don't get this competition to the point whereby it actually starts to reduce prices. You just get a lot of companies who are putting prices up all the time, but you almost get like a seesaw effect of one company's prices goes up maybe more one year, and then their price doesn't increase all that much the year after, whereas another company's price will increase more, etc., and so on and so on, until people, like we have done in the UK regarding energy supply, and like Americans have regarding health services, you get shafted. And so it's recently that the government, even though we have a Tory government here, we have a Conservative government, and just to make it clear, I actually voted Conservative at this last election, 2 or 3 weeks ago. The government has now actually capped the price of the energy companies because it was getting out of hand. The competition wasn't working. The great advantage of having a large homogenous organisation like the NHS that's very wealthy, because obviously we all pay into it as taxpayers, and is very powerful, is it can go to pharmaceutical companies and it can say to pharmaceutical companies, how much does it cost for you to make that? What's the baseline price? And then, right, so if we order X amount of whatever it is, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's surgical equipment, whether it's people who supply aprons or gloves or linen or anything that hospitals use, when you're a big organisation, you've got an incredible amount of bargaining power, and you can actually dictate the price to bring in the best price for the people who are using the service, and in this case that's the taxpayer. Now, there seems to be in America this weird notion that because it's the government doing it, then that's something foreign, it's something that's different, it's something that's alien. Well, no, the government is there to represent you. The government is there, or should be there, to represent your interests. There is this saying, and I did make a comment on another video, that, there's this idea of no taxation without representation. So we pay taxes because we have people who represent us in Parliament in the UK or in Congress or the Senate or whatever in the United States, and they at least attempt or should attempt to represent our wants and needs. And therefore, we pay taxes because we understand that when we elect these people, and we all elect through a secret ballot, so there's no intimidation there, we all go along and we all put our cross down at the side of ideally our favourite candidates at election time, and then we give them the authority for the next 4 or 5 years to actually make decisions on our behalf. And we can still input, we can still write to our MPs or our congressmen or whatever it is and say, why are you doing this, and question them and whatever. But at the end of the day, they're going to make certain decisions on our behalf. And when you have something like health, because it is not a market-driven thing in the respect that, as I said before, you can't just sit there and dictate which restaurant will I go and eat at tonight. Well, that restaurant's got a good deal on there, so we might go there. Or, I quite like the look of that place, so let's go there. Health doesn't work like that. You're not in control of your health always. You can be walking down the street and get mown over by a car, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Yes, we do have a situation where, people for whatever reason don't always take care of themselves. But that might not necessarily be a what's the word I'm looking for? Spurious? Maybe that's not the right word. That may not be somebody taking advantage of the health service. That might be somebody who's simply vulnerable, who needs help, and they need to find the right help. And sometimes the first step will be to just go to the doctors or go somewhere, and maybe the help that they need is not from the NHS. It might be some other care advice or whatever that they need. So yeah, it's so frustrating when you hear this argument about individual responsibility. Well, it's your individual responsibility to go and vote at election time for a candidate who will act in your best interest. And if 60-70% of people who vote for a candidate who wants to bring in, like maybe Bernie Sanders, who wants to bring in some kind of socialised, in inverted commas, healthcare, and it doesn't have to be like the UK system. There are plenty of systems that, I think it's the German system where, and the French system as well, where they actually do have insurance companies. They pay into private insurance companies, but the government caps the amount of insurance that those companies can charge. And again, so there's always the government at some point dictating through legislation, and the government is there because of the will of the people. So the people are being responsible as individuals by voting for their representative to look after their best interests. And later on in this video, so I'll mention it now while I think on, this might have to be 2 or 3 videos because I'm already on 18 minutes. And I'm only 2.5 minutes into this video. Later on, Wealth of Nations talks about how hospitals, there is legislation brought in. I don't know if it's from the government or various states. I'm not sure at what level that legislation is brought in, that makes sure that hospitals can't turn away a client who actually, a person, a citizen who needs help, who's injured or who's suffering, and they have to treat them. Well, that's legislation brought in by the government to make sure that they do that. So why is that okay? But the rest of it's not okay. So anyhow, I'm going to go on for a little bit more, for a little bit longer.
So I think it's pretty good, actually. I think a lot of people are covered by it. Everybody's covered. They don't have to worry about paying for it. It's definitely more.
They don't have to worry about paying for it. This is the trend once again. People in a socialized system must pay for it. They do. They all pay for it. It comes from somewhere. It comes from taxpayers who are willing to pay the money. Let's make that very clear from the beginning.
Accessible for everybody, allows all of us to remain healthy, to live long lives as much as we can.
I think it's kind of a necessity that the government provides healthcare for its citizens.
Now, we've spoken to the two Republican ladies, and now we've reached what I imagine to be Democrats. New York City is a majority Democrat state. Majority Democrat state. And we can start to see those ideas coming forward. Ideas such as everyone having coverage, which is a good idea, which is an aim that I share. But my disagreement is how we go about getting there. Now, the United States is able to insure 91.2% of the population as it is, with the current system. 91.2% of the population, which is a good effort. We're doing well on that front. Now, what to do about the 8%? That is the question. That is the debate here. But consider this. Should the United States move to a universal system when 8% of the population already 91.2% of the population already have health care? It doesn't make sense. Let's move on.
Well, it's not just about the 8% that don't have healthcare, is it? That's a big problem. 8% is still 8%. It's not everybody. So there is this inequality built into the system. Well, it's not a system, is it? Because that's the problem. It's not a system. It's a mishmash of individuals all trying to get something that they need when they need it. And having it, and because of that, because it's not a system, having to pay through the nose for it, as and when something bad, as it inevitably will, happen to you. But it's not all, so it's not only that 8% that's not covered, it's the other 91% or 91.2, whatever it was. How good is their cover? You know, from the amount of research that I've done, and it's not majorly extensive, but I've done a fair amount of research into this. There are various levels of cover. They talk about bronze and silver and gold and platinum, and obviously the more, you know, platinum is going to be more expensive, I would imagine. Please correct me if I'm wrong. The cover is going to be more expensive than bronze. So what are you missing out with bronze cover that you get with platinum cover? Are you going to be completely covered if you get cancer? You know, what's the difference, and how expensive is it going to be? So it's not just the 8% that don't have cover. It's however much of the other percentage of the rest of the 91% has got cover that's inadequate. And and this is the problem. We don't know whether the cover or not is ever going to be inadequate until that person gets to a point whereby they need to access their medical insurance for an ailment that they've got that might be serious, that might be life-threatening, that they actually aren't covered for, or are maybe covered for a limited amount of time, and that therefore they have to mortgage the house, or they have to find some money from somewhere to pay for the treatment. It's just so overcomplicated when it doesn't need to be like that. And because it is so overcomplicated and everybody's doing it as a set of individuals, there is no cohesiveness within the system, because as I've said before, it's not even a system, then no wonder it's expensive, because that's not an efficient way to do it. As I said previously, you can't bring the market into it, because the market doesn't work to bring prices down in that kind of fashion. It actually works to keep prices high, unless the government comes in and provides a cap. So on every level so far, it's a major fail. So let me just carry on.
And this will be another Republican coming on.
If everybody has something for free, who's going to pay for it?
Okay, what if people pay for it by taxes? What do you think of that?
Well, that's going to increase. You like to pay taxes?
I mean, do I really need to respond to that? Again, there's this obsession with tax, because it's going to a government, like this government is this alien thing that does things to you, rather than looking at it as the government is my government. My representative sits on that government and speaks to everybody else's representative and tries to, not always, or should do ideally, and we can talk about money in politics and oligarchs and all that, but I don't want to get into that. You know, ideally your representative should be working for you and should be working for the people within that nation. It's your government. It's not this alien thing. So yes, you pay taxes, but why is that important? What's important is how much do you pay overall? Right? So you're definitely paying taxes for Medicaid and Medicare, or whatever it's called, for the very, very basic, for those who are unemployed or are disabled, and veterans have their own socialised health service. So already every American citizen is already paying for socialised, if you want to use that term. It's not something that, it's not even a term that we use over here in the UK. The NHS is just the NHS, it's the National Health Service. And it just does what it does. And I can talk about, if I have the time, I'll talk about how the National Health Service actually saves a huge amount of money as well at some point later on. But, you know, you've got a situation whereby you're not only paying taxes for the Medicaid, Medicare, the Veterans Health Service, but also you're paying a huge amount of insurance on top of that, when you may not even be universally covered. And plus there's still 8% of your population that isn't covered. So it's fail after fail after fail after fail. So anyhow, let's carry on.
So first of all, let me ask you, do you know...
Yeah, just a quick one about that. Obviously, as you get paid more, as your wages increase, you pay more. It's a percentage of your wage, and I can't remember what the percentage is. But at the moment, my own personal situation is I pay around about £70 a month of my taxation, which goes to the NHS. And obviously, I pay more tax than that because other things such as, you know, these local taxes, there's tax for fire and the army, the defence, etc., which, you know, we don't seem to bother. Even many Americans don't seem to bother paying tax for those things. So again, it's just weird that it's excuse me. So many Americans seem to have a problem with, because it's health, and I just don't get that at all. But still, anyhow, we'll carry on.
You know what the NHS is?
No.
They regulate and provide national health services for the UK.
What do you think the average copay is under the NHS?
I can't imagine it goes any lower than
The amount for me,
You see, it's funny as well because you hear these things such as co-pays and deductibles, and this language doesn't even exist over here. I mean, obviously, I understand that. Having done the research that I've done, I understand what these things are now, and I understand the reasons why you have them over there. But I suppose the best advice I can give is, if you're trying to understand the British health system, the NHS, pretend you're wiping your computer clean of all information. Just out your mind, get rid of anything to do with co-pays and deductibles and all of that nonsense, and just understand you pay X amount of cash through your wages every month, and then if you need to go to the doctor or you need to go to the hospital, you just go. You phone up, you get an appointment, usually the same day. Certainly where I am up here in Sheffield, there may be an issue in certain parts of London because it's very stretched there. It's almost like a different planet almost. There's a lot of issues in London, I think, but in the rest of the country, it's fairly easy to go and get an appointment at the doctor's, or if you need to, you go to accident and emergency and you get seen ideally within 4 hours. Might be longer in the middle of winter when there's a lot more ailments about, but generally speaking, that's what you do. Then you get treated, you get given some medicine or whatever it is you need, follow-up appointments, and you're sent on your way. You go home and you get on with your life. That's it. How easy is that? Why overcomplicate things? Why make life difficult for people? The whole point of having elected representatives is that they are there to work for you, to make your life better, your life simpler, your life easier. Because yes, we still do live in a capitalist society whereby, you hopefully have a set of skills and abilities that are useful to some organisation, be it a publicly funded organisation or a private organisation, and you have to go to work and you have stresses and strains in your job, whatever it may be. So why make life more difficult than it needs to be regarding more peripheral stuff like health, when it doesn't need to be like that? It's ridiculous. Let's carry on.
it's like $120 to see my family physician.
And so based on that, what would you guess would be the price there? Similar?
Probably, I would say probably higher.
It's actually, there isn't a copay, so it's $0. Do you know?
Okay, a $0 copay. That's fine, but what are the consequences of a $0 copay? If that woman has to go and pay $120 for a checkup, say, or for a visit, she's going to be certain that it's going to be an issue that needs to be addressed with the doctor. What is the trend in socialized countries? The trend is, and I'll only speak for Australia because this is the only measure that I've heard about preventing people from overusing and abusing the system. It was recently proposed by the Liberal government in Australia to impose an $8 fee every time a person goes to the doctor, an $8 copay, say. And it was widely rejected, of course, because everyone thinks that it unfairly affects the poor and disadvantages them more. But what is the reality? An $8 copay, whatever it is, any kind of copay, whether it's $5, $10, or $20, what does it do? It ensures that those who are going to the doctor are going there for legitimate reasons and not taking advantage When something is free, what happens? People generally take advantage of it. They generally abuse it. Now, a simple way to prevent that is some kind of copay system. So we have to weigh up the pros and cons of it.
Yeah, right. Okay. This is so frustrating. I don't know about the Australian system. And again, I'm probably going to repeat myself from what I said earlier. When people go along, it may look initially as though they are abusing the system because, you know, I've got a sore throat, I need to see the doctor. Well, you don't. You just need to take some, you know, sore throat medicine, you know, drink lots of water and sleep it off or whatever. But what usually happens when people are, shall we say, abusing the system is it's almost a cry out. They're actually needing some form of help. And it may not be that they actually need physical help from the doctor. It may be that they need some kind of psychological help, some kind of mental help. They may need to be transferred to a different care organisation, to social services or some other care provider to take care of them or to give them advice or whatever it may be. So it's not a case of, you know, we try not to just, oh, you're abusing the system, you're a nasty, horrible person, don't abuse the system, because if you do, we're going to slap a, you know, £10 charge on you or whatever it is. Now, in some respects, I have some sympathy for that. In one respect in particular, we do have a problem, anybody who maybe knows about British culture, is that we do tend to have a bit of a drinking culture. And so on a Friday and Saturday night, young people will go out and they will have quite a lot to drink and maybe get into fights and end up in accident and emergency. And that obviously puts a lot of cost on the system. Now, in situations like that, if it can be shown that those people who were there were actually the instigators of any kind of shenanigans, any kind of horseplay, any kind of aggravation, any kind of violent action, rather than being on the receiving end, then if they get convicted of violent behaviour, a fray, whatever it might be, and they have to be treated, or other people have to be treated at the accident and emergency centre, then yes, I would charge them for that service. Because that is clearly their fault. It's not always the case of because somebody is abusing the system, it's therefore their fault. People have different personality traits. Some people have more of an for example, some people have more of an addictive nature than other people. And so maybe when they were kids, when they were in the youth, they got involved in the wrong crowd. You know, this might sound, I might be sounding like a bit of a bleeding heart liberal here. But the fact of the matter is, you know, we're not all the same. We don't all have the same temperament. And if you've got an overly addictive metabolism, and you get into smoking, drinking, maybe taking drugs, whatever it is, when you're a teenager, and you find it incredibly difficult to get off, it may look as though you are responsible, or you should be responsible for your own health in that situation. But life is not that simple. People aren't that simple. We're not robots. We're not automatons. We don't just all follow the same path through life and be able to go, oh no, that's wrong, that's bad, I'm going to not do that. Life's not like that. It doesn't work. People are brought up in different environments with different influences and different personality traits. And so you can't just make this claim that because the same persons at the doctors every few days or whatever, that they are just abusing the system even when there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with them. I'm on 40 minutes, so I'm going to stop this now because I'm sure I'm going to run out of space on my phone and carry on once I've downloaded or uploaded this video, if I think it's worth uploading. Okay, part 2 will come up at some point in the future. Bye for now.